Hello there, and welcome everybody to yet another edition of the Journal-Star Sportswriters podcast. This is a special edition today with, grizzled old sports writers, a sports refugee, and the little kid in the department. This is Kirk Wessler. And part of the reason I did this is that tomorrow is my last day at the Journal-Star after 31 years, and we're not going to get maudlin about that at all. But I thought it'd be fun for this podcast to bring along these guys that I've been working with for the last 30-plus years. Got Dave Reynolds. Say hi, Dave.
Hello.
We have Dave Eminian, otherwise known as Cleve.
Hello.
We have Nick Vlahos, who used to be a sports guy and is now better known as Nick in the Morning online. Nick?
Maybe you won't get maudlin, but maybe some of us might.
What does maudlin mean anyway?
You got to look that up.
Wasn't there a TV show called Maud? And her middle name was Lynn. And then, sorry, bad thing.
Arthur.
Yeah, B. Arthur. And then we have Aaron Ferguson, the young'un in the group. And he's here. He wanted to tag along today.
I just wanted to listen, to be honest, but here I am.
And so here he is, and if he feels like saying, so, hey, great-grandpa, what was it like when to cover?
And they're all going to respond.
Something like that. So welcome, everybody. Hope you enjoy this. We're just going to kind of reminisce today because when old sports writers, and we really should have done this in a bar. Right?
I agree.
That would have been perfect,
We should have done this in a bar and had the clanking glasses and throwing down beers and talking about this. But next best thing, I mean, this is what we talk about when we gather, on the road or after work at night and whatnot. So I just want to start off. I'm curious for you guys. How did you get started in the business? Let's start with Dave Reynolds.
Well, I was kind of a sports writer rat from the get-go. I wrote for my high school paper, wrote sports, wrote for my college newspaper, became the sports editor there, went directly from college into my first job at the Ames Daily Tribune in the sports department.
Ames is in Iowa, right?
It is.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
And
anybody else been to Ames besides me and Dave?
I've been to Ames.
Okay.
lovely little town.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cyclones.
The saga continued at the Des Moines Register for a couple of years, and then on to the Journal-Star for the last 30, almost 36. So sports most of the time, a little bit of news here and there, but mostly sports.
And the senior person in the Journal-Star newsroom existing today.
Existing is the operative word.
And I'll just keep moving around proximity here. Nick Vlahos, how did you get roped into doing this wonderful work?
I got roped into it from a journalism class my junior year at Bradley that was taught by Shelley Epstein, who was the longtime City Hall reporter, Springfield reporter, editorial page writer at the Journal-Star. And this would have been in the fall of 1983, almost exactly 35 years ago. And I was a journalism major, but my emphasis was in broadcasting. I wanted to be on television and radio and that sort of thing. Of course, I have a radio face, but maybe radio should have been a better vantage point. But he pulled me aside one day and said, listen, if you're looking for any kind of experience, Dick Lean, the assistant sports editor at the Journal-Star, is always looking for people to come in on Friday nights and answer the telephone from high school coaches that call in their football games or basketball games. So, why don't you go on down there and apply? So I went on down here and I met him and I met Paul King, who was a sports editor back then, and said, you're hired. And spent my Fridays and Saturdays, for the most part, my last 2 years of college, answering phones and even getting to go out and cover some games and swim meets, track meets, cross-country meets, basketball games, whatever they wanted me to do, that's what I did. And I liked it so much, I decided to forego those broadcast dreams that I might have had. Went to graduate school at University of Missouri and covered a very bad football team for the Columbia Missourian.
Coached by?
Woody Woodenhofer, as a matter of fact. 1-10 and 3-8 the 2 years I was there. And that was, you have to get really creative to think of things to write about.
Go ahead. I got to interject because I worked in Columbia. This is the first full-time job that I had, and I was there at the beginning of the Woody Woodenhofer era. And I then moved onto the city desk out of the sports department, so I was out of sports for a while. My successor as sports editor in Columbia was Don Kousler. And Don comes in, and he was out talking to Woody one day, and he was trying to explain, because we were an afternoon newspaper in Columbia, except on the weekends. We were morning, Saturday and Sunday, but we were an afternoon paper through the week. And Don was trying to explain something in an answer to a question Woody asked about, you know, I don't get this stuff. You keep talking about AM paper, PM paper. You're not a PM paper. You're great paper. This guy was
a great story.
Was a little shy of being brilliant. But he does have 4 Super Bowl rings, so you can't deny him that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, he was an assistant coach with the Steelers,
right.
and all
Steel
that.
Curtain.
But
anyway,
you know, it's funny because Kirk, you know, you started out the same way I did as a part-timer here in Peoria, and then you went to Columbia.
Right.
And when I was, you know, leaving here in the fall or spring of '85, and people were all telling me, it's like, well, when you get down to Columbia, go give Kirk Wessler a call at the Tribune. He, you know, maybe he'll give you a part-time job doing something. And by the time I got around to calling you,
I was gone.
You were gone. you were in Dallas. So much for that. But we ended up working together many years later. After I got out of Mizzou, I went up to work in Fargo, North Dakota for a little while, and then I had an opportunity to come back to Peoria. This would have been February of 1988. Came down here, or down here, I guess, from Fargo. Interviewed with Kirk and some other people, and got hired then, and spent until 2011 in the sports department, and then since then I've been at the paper, but I've been working in news, and I can't say I ever regretted any of it.
Cleve, wake up, wake up.
That was good, Nick in the AM.
Well, first of all, why don't we tell people why he has that nickname? Or why don't you tell people why you have that nickname?
I got it from Gary Childs. We had a staff at one point that I think had at least four Daves.
It was like Dr. Seuss's 23 Daves. You know,
yeah.
Mrs. McCabe named them all Dave.
And Gary Childs I'm a Cleveland, Ohio native, and born and raised in all things Cleveland sports, unfortunately. And one night, Gary Childs just got tired of, hey, anytime someone would say, hey, Dave, and 4 people would answer. And he started handing out nicknames, and he dubbed me Cleve, and it's been that way ever since, to the point where my wife would call to talk to me and ask for Cleve. So that's when I knew there was no going back.
Now everybody you cover, the Chiefs, the Rivermen, everybody you cover calls you Cleve.
Yeah. National Hockey League GMs call me Cleve.
And Cleve and I first met when we lived in Fredonia Hall at Bradley University together back in 1982.
Oh, yeah, those temporary dorms that had inch-wide gaps in the ceiling between the wall and the ceiling, and you could lay in your bed and talk at a normal voice level to the person next door. Mm-hmm. And those are interesting times. I went to Bradley from Cleveland State thinking I was going to be a pitcher. I got welcomed as a walk-on by Dewey Calmer, and it didn't go so well. I ended up serving as a catcher in practices, catching bullpen sessions, and my baseball career ended pretty quick.
But your slow pitch softball career took off after that.
I was dynamite on the slow pitch softball circuit in those.
Well, he could hit the ball a mile. You just couldn't.
We
had a little
put you
trouble.
In the field, though. I mean,
mobility was an issue.
All hit, no field.
Oh no, I was good at third.
He was good, but we couldn't keep you healthy.
Yeah, it was those hamstrings wouldn't hold up under what was then 250 pounds, and is now way north of that. But it was interesting. I was thinking I was going to be an advertising major, and joined my father after I graduated, who owned an ad agency in Cleveland. But I ended up moving into newsprint journalism. I had grown up on the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which in my era was, probably a top 10 or 12 sports section in the country. It was had some great writers, from Russ Schneider to Hal Lebowitz, and just really, really legendary guys. And I kind of wanted to do that. So I went to Bradley and started with that curriculum, and my professor, journalism professor, Paul Snyder, the great Dr. Snyder.
F.E.
That's right.
Red stamp, F.E. Fact error.
Yes.
Failed.
Definitely. And he he was appalled that I wanted to be a sports writer, and was telling me my future was in Washington, D.C. writing politics, and I just couldn't see that. And finally he gave in and contacted Dick Lean and gave him my number. And I got a call one day. I'm laying in the dorm, and I get a call, and hello, I'm Dick Lean. Would you like to go cover something for the Journal-Star? And I'm like, sure. Great, there's a swim meet in 12 minutes. Go across the campus and cover that. Okay, and that was the first thing I ever covered for this newspaper. And, I loved it from the get-go. And just great camaraderie. And our staff was big in those days, and you just had a sense that you could do anything, coverage-wise. And so it's been a long and fun ride. I ended up about a year later, got another phone call from late sports editor Paul King. Cocktail glass ice tinkling in the background. Cleveland, I would like to hire you to cover the Rivermen. I said, yeah, sure, fine. I'm halfway through my senior year at Bradley. That's not a problem. You'll finish that easily. And so as we sit here today, I'm in my 35th year as a second semester senior at Bradley.
You still haven't got your diploma.
No. But, I got a lot of wall hangers out of it, and I wouldn't do anything different. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great business. I had a little different initiation into this than you guys. And I have to go way back because my first newspaper experience was in the 7th grade at Concordia Lutheran School in Peoria when my best friend John Brandt, who happened to be the principal's son, started drawing on this piece of paper one day, and he handed it to me. And I said, cool. And across the top he had written True Blue Love News. And so we started just writing down little gossip stuff about the little love lives of our classmates, and then we started passing it up and down the row, and add to this, who's on the outs with who's on the ins with who, and it became this little tabloid rag sheet that we passed around.
Scandal sheet you got.
Yeah, we didn't make any money off it, but it was pretty fun.
Sounds like TMZ.
Until one of the teachers intercepted it and caught it.
Whoops.
And then we had to shut down. But then they thought it was kind of amusing, and so then John's dad, as we got sent to the principal's office for passing around this scandal sheet, John's dad, Marvin, was pretty bright. He said, well, why don't you channel this in a little more productive fashion and help us start a school newspaper? So we started the school newspaper. I don't know if it still exists or not, but that was my first introduction. But that's still not what I wanted to do. I actually went through high school and I thought, I want to teach. I want to be a history teacher. I loved history. I wanted to be a history teacher, and I wanted to coach. So I went to Bradley and majored in history and education, secondary education, and I was running track and cross country and realized after my freshman year that as a walk-on that, I wasn't Division I level talent by any stretch, and I was kind of spinning my wheels on that. So I thought, well, I got to have something else to do. So I went to the Bradley Scout and figured, well, that's a good way to pass time. And Jim Rupert, who we all know used to work here part-time and then was the longtime sports editor after that in Springfield, he said, yeah, okay, that's cool. You ran cross country, why don't you go cover it? So I started doing that stuff. Eventually that led to a part-time job here. Dick Lean called me up right before, I think it was the winter break, my junior year, and said, how would you like to work here part-time? Well, okay, whatever. So that led to that. And I still was intent on teaching. This was just a way to make some money. And then but 9 months later, by then I was smitten, and I went to my first day of teaching, student teaching, at Richwoods High School. And so I was doing half days, 3 classes a day or something I was supposed to be doing. And so I went to the class, and I think it was the third class. The supervising teacher said, "I'll be right back. I got to run down to the office for a minute." He runs down. He leaves the room, and this young juvenile delinquent throws his feet up on the desk of a girl across the row from him. And I just looked and I said, "Please put your feet down." And he's sitting there, looks kind of like you are, Cleve, with his arms folded. And he just sits there like this, and he goes, "No." And I'm sitting there in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, fine, I quit. And I waited, and as soon as he saw the teacher coming back down the hall, the feet hit the floor again, and and I never said anything to him, but I went home and I called my advisor, and I said, "I'm done. I know this is not working. I'm not going to do this anymore." And so
when the going gets tough,
well, you quit. Go into journalism. So that's how I wound up in the business. And then I finished out my senior year here, and then was fortunate enough to get my first full-time job down in Columbia, Missouri, and right place at the right time. I mean, I'd been down there less than a month. And I was covering high schools, and I was happy as a clam. I didn't have an ambition to be some big shot thing or whatever. I was just, this is cool. I get to go cover high school sports. And I'd been there 3 weeks maybe, and 3-4 weeks. And the guy that was covering Mizzou football got a job in Memphis. So they took my buddy, my roommate at the time, Mickey Spagnola, moved him off of basketball, put him on football. And my boss comes to me, "Oh, you've been doing a pretty good job. How about you cover Mizzou basketball?" So 3-4 weeks into my first job, I'm on the Mizzou basketball beat. And just went from there. And Columbia to Dallas, the old Times Herald in Dallas. And then when the opportunity came to come back to Peoria 30-some years ago, I came back and been here ever since. And now it's going to be over. But it's been a blast. It's fun. So we've all mentioned Dick Lean.
Yeah, he was
unavoidable
stories.
An amazing personality.
each here. And Aaron, you can pop in anytime you want, but you never got to meet Dick. So I mean, anytime you got a question or clarity, you go ahead and speak up, please. But I want to start with you, Cleve. Your favorite Dick Lean story, and for those of you,
just one.
Dick Lean worked here from, I think he started when he was a student at Bradley.
Yeah, he did.
In the early 60s. I think it was 1962, 63, something like that, maybe even early. He might have been here when he was at Peoria High.
He had covered, hadn't he covered every Bradley game?
Yeah, he took over the Bradley beat, I think, in 1965.
64 to 86, he covered every game.
Without ever missing one, I believe.
Right.
And he became the assistant sports editor, and that's where we all encountered him because he was hiring
big, rotund
us.
guy with absolute white hair, Santa Claus hair, and just a crabby disposition. Anything could set him
mother
off.
hen.
Yeah, and just always shaking his head, and pursing his lips, and he was something to be
Pull the
around.
glasses off and chew on them.
Yeah, yeah. I remember a phone call, and it was a wrong number phone call to the sports department, and it was a little kid, and Dick answers the phone, and he's talking. Yes, yes, yeah, yes, yes. Then he looks up and goes, "The little fellow would like to know what time the Cubs game starts." And that's just the kind of personality he had. He drove his car down to the bottom of the Journal-Star driveway where there was I forget what gas station it was.
Norco.
It was a Norco station.
Norco, yeah.
Come to the Norco station.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was a little two-pump Norco. And Dick apparently didn't believe in putting oil or any fluids in his car. And his engine seized while he was there in those pumps. And I get a phone call on the desk up here. "Cleveland, come to the Norco station." And he wouldn't tell me why. So I go down there, and there's Dick. "Can you give me a ride home?" I go, "Are you locked out of your car? We can call a locksmith." "No, it will never run again." And I look, and the front end, the grill, had been taken off at another time and was laying on in the back seat inside the car. And he went home and left it there in the pumps and never looked back. So those are the kind of things that he just he was a riot, but he also had a kind side to him that I think we all saw at times too.
Great mentor.
Yeah,
a great mentor.
Yeah, I mean he called me said you're like a son to me once, and his criticism stung, but Dick was a beautiful writer.
Oh,
just
spectacular.
Might be still one of the best college basketball reporters I've ever read.
Yeah.
He could have worked in a major city, covering a major team at the drop of a hat. But Peoria was his hometown.
And
he loved Bradley, and he loved Peoria, and he didn't want to go anywhere.
And we've got a lot of guys, guys at this table that certainly have the skill and the talent level to have worked. Cover major league teams in big cities, but when you work here, you also love the paper and love the market, and I think it keeps you here.
Yeah.
That's what's kept you here.
Something about this town, man. It gets into your blood, and you can't get it out.
Well, it's easy for me. I married a Peoria girl, so I married Peoria. That stuff was
you married
laid out
120,000 people when you married Deb, right?
Yes, that was laid out from the get-go. You guys know that.
I've been warned about that a time or two.
Yeah. Do not date in Peoria, or you'll be here for life.
Well, and speaking of Dick stories, as gifted as a writer as he was, Dick had just an affinity, or a lack of an affinity, I guess, for little people and desk clerks and waitresses.
Elevator operators.
Anybody that he perceived maybe as having a less prestigious job than him. Well, I went on a trip with him my first year with Bradley out to Cal Irvine, and Bradley was playing Cal Irvine the first game, and we check into the hotel. We get to the hotel, very gracious, very friendly man, at the desk, and when we get there a little bit too early to check in. You guys have all been there. You have to sit and wait till your room's ready. Well, a couple people ahead of us had this problem. Okay, they step aside, and then Dick steps to the counter and says, "Yes, room for Lean, please." And as if he had paid no attention to the previous people. Right. And the guy said, taps on his computer and, "Well, sir, we just don't have any rooms yet, but it'll be another hour or so. We're getting them clean now," and had a long explanation, and Dick interrupted him a couple of times. "Well, what about this?" And, and anyway, the guy was very friendly, and finally, a couple minutes later, Dick says, "Well, this has not been the most impossible situation I've had at a desk, but it is in the top 5. And the guy said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." So many instances with waitresses.
Wasn't there one where you and Dick were? It was up it was in the Chicago area, I think, at a Bradley game. You were parked in the back parking lot with semis all around you that were running, and he was getting gassed. He was sitting in the back seat of the coach's wife's car, I think.
Yes, I vaguely remember that, but that reminds me of the time he and Brian Oberle were in Tulsa driving a rental car, and they ran out of gas, and Dick is driving, and he's going like this and cussing at the car.
Not the only time in Dick's life he ran out of gas, let me tell you.
And Phyllis Albeck, the wife of Coach Stan Albeck, had to come to their rescue. This is probably pre-cell phones. I think they had to walk to a telephone booth and call, and Phyllis was the one that drove down and picked them up and brought them back to the hotel. There were countless incidents like that with Dick.
There was one time when I was a sports copy editor for many years, so I would have to handle Dick's copy. And he was down covering a Bradley game one night. I think he might have been writing a column on it. And he comes back from the game and he's just incensed because it's like he couldn't. Somebody stole his computer bag. It's like some SOB stole my computer bag, and I find it's the last thing I do.
That's not exactly how he said it, Nick.
No, I'm trying to sanitize it a little bit for your protection.
We're on the internet. You can use it.
So anyway, he's ranting and raving about this unknown SOB that stole his computer stuff, and while he's right in the middle of this, another fellow from our staff who had been down there covering the game with him comes walking in with this bag and goes, "Hey, Dick, you left your bag down in the coach's room down there," and it's like, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah.
I got a call on the desk after a Bradley game one night. It's pouring rain. And I look over, and Dick's there. He's at his workstation. He's on we had those big, I think they were Harris terminals.
Green tube DOS system.
So he's working on that, but he had a laptop. So I get a call, and it's security. And they knew me as the Riverman beat writer. And they go, hey, Dave, there's a bag down here on press row, and it's got a name on it. It says Dick Lean. There's also keys to a car, an umbrella, and an overcoat. And I'm looking over at Dick. I'm like, how the hell did he get back here? I said, Dick, your entire life is laying on Press Row down at the Civic Center. Oh, I should be sacking potatoes.
That was one of the great lines.
Sacking potatoes.
You talk about back, some of the Dave mentioned, before cell phones.
Yeah.
And, this goes way back. This is when I was a part-timer. We're mid-'70s. And back then, there was no there were no laptops, there were no computers to send your story to. You typed it out on an old typewriter, and then there were some places were starting to get where they had telecopiers where you could put it in, and it was this magic thing. It took like 6 or 8 minutes a page to crank through, but you got the story, and then you could retype it in the office. But most of the time, you dictated. And so you would get done with your story, and you'd find a phone, and you would call collect. Because there was no 800 number that we had at that time. You'd call collect and get somebody on the desk and then dictate your story to them and typing, okay? So Dick's, he's wherever he is. He's Tulsa, he's out in Amarillo, someplace. He calls up, and I'm like, he's going to dictate his Bradley game story to me. And he's got to do it from a payphone. And he has called collect. So he's gotten the operator, he's called collect. And we're going, and like every 2 minutes, the operator is interrupting. Please deposit another 25 cents. And Dick just every time is getting more and more enraged. He goes, damn you, operator. This is a business collect call. There is no money owed. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. 2 minutes later, please deposit another 25 cents and continue the call. Damn you, woman. Do you not understand that this is a business call and I called collect? And I'm just dying. I'm trying to don't laugh. Don't laugh. It would be the death of your career if you laughed.
Dick was going through a stretch when he was a columnist where he was just constantly, after he would file his column, he would call like 2 or 3 times and say, I have a change to make in my column, or I have a correction to make in my column. So it became kind of like a running joke on our copy desk. It's like, oh, when's Dick going to call with his, corrections or whatever? So he filed one night, and I think this was like for the 3rd time he called and says, oh, I have a change to make to my column. I put the phone down and goes, hey, guess what? Dick's got a change to make to his column. And everybody in the room just starts laughing. And then I hear this yelling coming in over the room, rah, rah, and in Dick's voice, it's like, yeah, Dick, what's going on? I said, what is going on in there? I said I needed to make a change to my column, and the next thing I know, I hear laughter.
Oblivious.
He was beautiful with the word. And, he used to preach simple declarative sentences. Just always tell you simple declarative sentences, and they didn't get any simpler or in a way more eloquent than this. And this got to the heart. I thought this is one of my favorite all-time Dick Lean leads, and we all have them. But it got to, he was a consummate reporter. I mean, he was inside. He told the story. He knew everybody inside out and got the facts. And he was a great storyteller. And even though he was covering Bradley, and so you've got that disconnect, that passion, that dispassionate part. He was also, he grew up going to Bradley games. He had gone to Bradley. I mean, he wanted Bradley to do well. And this was long before Dave took over the beat. Dick was still on the beat. He was before he was column, and it was in the NCAA tournament, and they were down in wherever, first round. They were playing Texas A&M, and it was a hell of a game, and they lost heartbreaking fashion in the first round. It was a 1 or 2 point game after everything had been going right, and Dick's lead was just one word: damn.
Very nice.
Which was cool because it was like it summed up the emotions of everybody on the team that he was covering, the frustration of all the fans that were following them and reading him, back home in Peoria, and it was not a commentary of, damn, I'm upset they lost. it just encapsulated the entire experience of losing in that fashion.
One of his leads that stood out to me, when you first got here, I was still, I think I was only in my third year, and we collaborated on a Peoria Civic Center investigation, and it won awards, and your oversight gave me the confidence I needed. But in that project, the Civic Center general manager at the time, Harold Hansen, said something to the effect of, Peoria, is Peoria really a strong sports market and will support this team here, this Riverman team, or is it all? And then he says, BS. And Dick's reply, he wrote a column replying to it the next day, and his lead was, well, bullshit yourself, sir. And then he just launched, and I've never forgotten that lead. Well, so he had a way
and he could cut right to the heart of it. I mean, in an interview or a press conference, we all remember the ill-fated Prairie State games that came here.
God,
they took the city for a ride, and they were here, and with all this bluster, and the city got behind it, and then they realized this was not the thing to get involved with. And then when the Prairie State games organizers, we're not going, so there will be no Prairie State games next year, and it's like pulled the plug on it. And they had a press conference down at the Civic Center. This was, the Civic Center people and the organizing committee here and the Chamber of Commerce.
I remember.
And they made this announcement, and they read their statement and said, "Okay, we'll take questions." Because we received a phone call this morning that the Prairie State Games organizers, they decided not to come back. So they said, "Any questions?" And Dick pipes up. He says, "Did they call collect?"
Oh God! And then there's the two Dick Leans at the hotel story too, right? I can't remember how.
Oh, the coach. He was at
wasn't he Wisconsin Green Bay,
I think.
Yeah.
His name was Dick Lean also, and he had checked into the room with his wife, I believe, and half an hour later, here comes our Dick Lean, fumbling with the key. It's his pre. Slide days. Right. It was just the actual key. He opens up the door and sees this man and his wife sitting on the bed. And our Dick Lean says, "Well, this is my room. Who are you?" And the man says, "Dick Lean." And he says, "No, I am Dick Lean." So I think they got it figured out, but probably not too easily.
Well, that's the bottom line. We're talking about Dick Lean, but there have been a lot of personalities.
Yeah. Let's morph into that.
That's part of what has made our sports department special, and I'm sure all newspapers say that. But I remember the night. Phil Theobald decided to try to put Gary Childs in a giant garbage dumpster. And on Friday nights, if Phil stood up and took his dress shirt off and he had that old man undershirt on, you knew there was going to be a war in the newsroom about something. And Bob Levitt and people like that have come through, and you've seen them and interacted with them. What are your thoughts?
Well, there were. I mean, you talk about characters. People like Wayne the Doctor Ragoose. And
I have a doctor story.
Go ahead. Go.
My first night at the Journal-Star, November 1st, 1982. I worked on the desk. Theobald was showing me the ropes. Here's how the computer works. Here's what to expect tonight on the phones. And so I get through the night. At the end of the night, Wayne, Dr. Ragoose, says, "Okay, we're all heading down to the Penguin Tap." So I looked at one of the other guys. "Does this happen all? Oh yeah, every night." And so we go down to the Penguin Tap, and I get down there, and Wayne orders 2 beers. And I figure, oh, man, he's buying me a beer my first night and everything. No, they were both for the doctor. And he looked at me and says, "You know why they call me the doctor, don't you?" And I said, "No." He says, I'm an MD, master of drinking. Go ahead.
Oh no. That's there were there's so many, and
there's the one where he fell asleep at his terminal.
Oh yeah, and Dick went over to
In his later
Doctor.
years. And,
Well, and his nose got stuck on the Z key.
on the Z, and so it's just wrapping around on the screen. All these
not
Z's.
not the N key or the D key. It was the Z key.
There's a spell sheet on the Z key. How much
While
more
he
ideal
slept.
can it get, right?
We had a picture of that floating around for
Yeah.
a while. I don't know whatever happened to it.
Well, and then there was the great headline he wrote on one of your Riverman stories. When I tell that story,
the Rivermen had beaten Salt Lake City in a game 5-4 or 5-1, something like that. But Dick wrote a headline that
no, it was
said,
Doc.
Doc wrote a headline that said, Riverman, not Rivermen, Riverman Calamzeo 320T.
Riverman wings Calamzeo.
Wings
Riverman
Calamzeo. Wings as a verb,
Calamzeo.
yeah.
Calamzeo 320.
And there was literally not a single element in that headline that was correct.
Doc wrote a headline one time on a Cubs game, and the headline said, "Cubs get revenge at SD 5-4." And the game was actually in Chicago, not in San Diego, and the score was like 4-3, not 5-4.
Well, then there was the time that we made him. He didn't want to make up. Somebody made him make up the paper, and it was one of the horse races, and he put 16 mug shots of the horses in the field in the paper.
I think he had Swale and Citation mixed up, but maybe not.
Some of those. And that stuff was nightly occurrences, and it was fun. And those guys were great guys to socialize with and to work with, and everybody was. Even the difficult personalities were there to help. Especially when you were a young, up and comer.
Absolutely.
And that was the thing with me. There were two quick stories that they were handled by two different people, two different ways, but I got the lesson. And they were in those 18 months that I was a part-timer here when I was in college. And they both happened like in the first 4 or 5 weeks that I was here. And first one was a couple of weeks in, and I'm working the desk, and I'm getting comfortable. I had moved up from only doing just box scores, and I was getting a couple or three little short 2 and 3 paragraph stories to write about the games that were being called in. It was basketball season. And some kid in Bushnell or someplace, I think it was Bushnell, scored 38 points. 38 points in this game. Now we're flying, we're on deadline, so I've got like 3 paragraphs to write, and I go, Tommy Smith burned the nets for 38 points Friday night to lead Bushnell Prairie City to whatever. And I get done with the story, I turn it in, and like 5 minutes later, over on the sports copy desk, I hear Theobald. "Oh my God, call the fire department, send them to Bushnell. Bushnell's burning to the ground. They're burning the nets and this town's on fire." And I'm looking, I go, what? And he goes, "You score points. You don't burn nets. You score points." Duly noted, nobody ever burned a net in a story of mine ever again or anything close to it. The other one, and it was handled in just opposite fashion and every bit as effective, Stan Hieronymus, who just one of the great newspaper people all around that I've ever worked with. He was working the slot. He was making up the pages one night, and we had back then 3 editions every morning. And this was the first time he had said, "Okay, I want you to handle the Western Illinois basketball story." Western was on the road someplace, because we covered most of their home games back then. They were on the road someplace, and they wanted like a 8 or 9 paragraph story. And I'm like, wow, this is like 2 or 3 times anything the length that I've written before, and it's going to be on deadline. The deadline's was what, 10:30, 10:40 or something like that for that first edition. So it comes in, and I'm slamming away on this story, and I've got a couple good quotes, and I'm trying to work it out here and write the story, and I'm sweating, and I hear Stan yelling, "Gotta have that Western story, gotta have that Western story." And, okay, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I'm just trying desperately to finish it up. He goes downstairs, because back then it was, they had to cut and paste on the tables in the composing room. And I sweat it out, I send the story in, and now I'm off working on things for the next edition. First edition finishes up. Stan comes back upstairs to work on the second edition. He stops by my desk, or the desk I was at, puts his hand on my shoulder, and very quietly says, "Really nice story on Western Illinois' game." I said, "Well, thank you." He goes, "Too bad nobody in Macomb will get to read it because it was late." Lesson learned about making deadline. Do not miss deadlines. He says, "You can be short." He says, if I give you 9 paragraphs to write and you only have 5, that's fine. I'll fill the other 4. He says, "But if you don't give me anything, I have nothing to put there."
Well, that's the thing about those guys. I mean, guys like Bob Levitt.
Bob Levitt, I was just going to say.
And guys like Theobald and Stan and Wayne and Dick, too. I mean, they not only were they excellent journalists in a lot of ways, but they were also really good teachers, which really wasn't their job, but they ended up being that way anyway because there were so many school kids that were here working part-time, trying to get some experience, going to Bradley or going to ICC or someplace like that, and hoping to maybe get into this business at some point. Their methods were a little unorthodox sometimes. They were not like your typical college professor. They could yell at you, they could get in your face, they could be intolerant, and some of that was just a production of Deadline being the way it was. But you always knew that they had a good heart and that they were coming from a good place, that they weren't mean, nasty about it most of the time. They just wanted to see you get better. And if you showed any kind of aptitude or any kind of understanding of what they were trying to do, then you were set for life with those guys. They treated you like gold.
Yeah.
Bob Levitt, partly you were afraid of him. I mean,
I still am.
Yeah.
I just had dinner with him last week. I'm still afraid of him.
I get emails from him all the time. If I have too many that's in my story, he gets on my case about it. But I saw from him how to manage a beat and
right.
the value of context. His passion and his control over preps was phenomenal, and that's how I tried to pattern myself. So the teaching element was there. Even though I disagree, Bob, I think when a kid snaps a 4-punt, snaps into the end zone, it's relative. I got chewed out once for that.
Yeah.
But he was terrific, and we were all scared to death of him.
And Bob was a guy who had immense talent, was a great reporter.
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
And passion, and knew everything
Absolutely.
that happened on his beat. I mean, everything. And it was like coaches. And, you guys have been in this position yourselves because you're good reporters of what you do. But, I mean, Bob just ruled the thing to the point that if something was going to happen at a school, the coaches would call Bob and say, "Okay, we're going to do this. When do you want us to do it so that we can get the best pop in the paper?"
Yeah.
Do you remember when Sergio McLean and Marcus Griffin declared for Illinois? When they played at Manual, the whole machinations that went into that?
No, tell that story.
Apparently, this was the Manual kids from the 4P team. This was in '96, I think. And, everybody been sniffing around trying to figure out where those guys were going to go to college. And I think Rick Tellender, who's a Peoria guy who was from the Sun-Times back then, he was actually in the Manual gym one day, and some other guys were back there too. But they all wanted the story. But, obviously Bob had a relationship with those guys. He had a relationship with the Manual coach, Wayne McLean, and Bob was going to get that story first. So they sneaked Bob into like a laundry room someplace where the kids were sitting, and he
Not
interviewed
an easy
them.
task there.
No, well, yes, Bob was kind of a big guy, so sneaking him anywhere was kind of that way too. And he got the story, came back up to the office, and I remember that we were getting phone calls all the time from just people, Illini fans, high school basketball fans, whomever. Where are those guys going to go to school? It's like, I don't know. And Bob's kind of sneaked in a back way to our office. It was almost like he was going to some like Pope conclave or something, and writes his story, and we get it in the paper, and he had it before anybody else did, because that's the kind of reporter he was. That's how much he cared about those people, and those are the relationships that he managed to foster for 30 years that he was here.
Yeah.
And those are the personalities. When I think about us, I think about in the context of all those guys.
Absolutely. None of us would be who we are today.
Right.
And I mean that as people and as journalists, without those. They all had an impact on our careers.
We need to make sure we mention Jane Miller, too.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I watched advocate time and time again for auto sports, which was her passion. And
Right.
take that task on. So just
Well,
really committed people
and-
on our staff all these years.
And you know, Jane, I mean, had an impact that reaches to this. I mean, she's been retired now for what, 5-6 years, and she has had an impact that's going to last for God knows how long on area girls basketball. Not just because of her reporting, but toward the end of her career, she was out at Curly Boo Johnson's camp. Curly Boo Johnson runs a terrific basketball camp for a week, Skills for Life Academy. It's out at Dunlap High School. It used to be, it grew to where they need Dunlap High School and Dunlap Middle School to pull the whole thing off. And she was out there. I'd assigned her to go out there to do a story on it. And she's out there talking to CBJ, and she says, basically, why is this all boys? There's a lot of girls around here that are pretty good basketball players. And CBJ is thinking, yeah, that's not a bad idea. And so he started the girls portion of that camp because of Jane Miller. And now the girls part of that camp has outstripped the boys in terms of numbers. I mean, it's just enormous.
I think the girls MVP award, if I'm not mistaken,
is named after
her.
Jane
Jane
Miller.
Miller
Yeah,
Award.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, it's absolutely.
And Boo's become one of the biggest proponents of women or girls basketball, at least in this area.
Right. Oh yeah. If you follow Boo Johnson's Twitter account, he follows the area high school kids religiously, and boys and girls. But it's really cool to see him give the shout outs. He follows them and gives them shout out anytime they do something remotely noteworthy. So,
Kirk, I got a question for you. I mean, growing up here back when you did, how has our sports market changed over all those years?
Wow.
I mean, we were a large staff with fewer things. Now we have more things, and we are a shrinking staff.
Yeah.
I mean, as a sports editor and as somebody who's lived here decades, how is it different today?
Well,
what are the challenges?
Just need a book practically. When I was growing up here, and I guess this is the most stark thing, okay, that I can think of to give you an example. When I grew up here, the high school season was a big deal, and Bradley basketball was a big deal. But there were no Rivermen, there was no Chiefs. And you got to summertime, and that was pretty much it for the local sports scene. There were no girls sports, okay, no girls sports, and the Striders and the Steamboat Classic, which I ran in the first one, by the way, didn't come along till like 1974 or something like that. So, and the summers were empty. Okay, now you date back even further and into that era and earlier. That's a big part of the reason that the Peoria Men's City Golf Tournament and the seniors, then the senior city and the Tri-County Tennis Tournament, those three events in particular, and there were some others as well. There was the Journal Star Summer Preps League for baseball, but a big part of the reason those things were founded, these were either solely the idea of Paul King or Kenny Jones before him, or they were done in concert with the Park District or District 150. And yeah, part of it was provide people something to do, things to do, keep them active, satisfy maybe an itch, have a nice tournament, whatever it might be. But the other part was finding something for your sports writers to do in the summertime, because otherwise they were sitting around here waiting for horse racing results to come in and see whose bets to collect. So it was just totally different then, and the landscape started to change to some extent in the 70s, and then I graduated from Bradley and moved away, and when I came back,
Very different.
88 or whatever it was, to have full-fledged, minor league sports, the Rivermen, playing as a high-level minor league thing with the old IHL, and to have that close relationship with the Blues all those years, and seeing NHL players go up and down, and to have minor league baseball, even at the Class A level, and see guys a couple or 3 years after, and watch some guys like Greg Maddox or Mark Grace and on through the years, realize that guy's going to be a major league player. That guy's going to be a major league player. This is cool. And a couple, 3 years later, they become, they bust in and then they become stars. That and Peoria maintains that, and I think it adds to the quality of life, and it's just been terrific. And just the explosion of girls' sports and the addition of sports like soccer and now lacrosse. It'll be interesting to watch over the coming years the growth of lacrosse. It's just a completely different type of environment and community, and it's all very exciting.
It also seems like technology and approach-wise, for about 25 years, nothing really changed.
No,
and in the last 10, we've had to reinvent ourselves half a dozen times.
Yeah.
I mean, just about every guy sitting here, except for the baby, is a retrofit, with video and social media and all that stuff.
And Aaron knows this. When I hired him, what was it, 2 years ago? 3, 2, whatever it was.
I started 3 years ago this coming Friday.
All right. So when that happened, when I hired him, the reason, he obviously had talent and had some instincts as a good reporter, okay, but his background was television. Okay?
That's what I wanted to do.
That's what he wanted to do coming out of college. And I'm like, yeah, but here's a guy, and this is exactly what we need. We need a guy who instinctively understands this is what makes good video. And can produce a good video and do it quickly. And here's somebody that understands, is of that generation that's just lives inside the internet and just click, 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 gets it off, and just does those things instinctively that the older ones among us, we do all right now, and to varying degrees we do all right. Cleve, you're probably the best of the bunch of us in terms
it's not
of
easy, guys.
but it's been a thing where it's like, this is not natural to me. I mean, I got to figure out, and I got to remember to do this. And Aaron just, boop, this is the way you live. So.
I was I was at a high school girls the softball state finals a couple years ago when Adam Duvall was out there with us and working, and I'm out there. I got my 30 pounds of gear in my bag and my laptop and an old wired tethered mouse and all that stuff, and I'm looking at him. We're there all day, and he has nothing. Like, what are you doing? So, did you forget your laptop? You need to use my thing? He goes, no, I'm writing everything on my phone. And he's just standing there writing a story on his phone, and I'm like, I would go nuts.
I tried to do that once.
It's not possible.
No.
You have to be an alien.
Can you do that, Aaron?
Do that.
Can you write it on your phone?
If I have to, but I prefer not to.
Yeah.
I love the laptop.
But that's where we're going. And we're in competition now, too, with some guy sitting in his basement, on social media and
no, yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's a mess, but
Well, I'll tell you what, if we had like an easier operating system where we could do it from our phones, I probably would more often than not, just because it's the immediacy of this industry now has become.
That's just it. It's not even of course, it used to be a 24-hour news cycle. Then it was 1 hour, and now it's like 1 minute.
And that's a good and bad thing. I mean, I love the fact that the internet and all this stuff put us newspapers back in the immediacy game, because we had gotten the thing is like, well, it's going to be in the paper the next morning, but that's after it's been on radio and television and
unless you got a scoop
highlighted, you got a scoop.
There was nothing like that.
There's
anxiety.
There's almost no. That's true.
That was fun.
But it's virtually impossible to get a scoop today, and it wouldn't happen because nobody in the newspaper business that has a scoop today is going to wait till the morning edition to put it out there.
Well, not just
they're going to have it and bang now.
You're also competing with the players themselves.
Well, right. So that whole thing.
I mean, they're. I just signed with so-and-so, and he puts it on his Twitter account, and you're like, all right, I just talked to the team, and we had the plan to put this out on this day, and this guy just blew it up.
Yeah.
So you have to do everything.
You do. But I find it exciting. I mean, it's invigorating.
It's exhausting though.
It is.
Because it's 24/7.
It's incredibly frustrating sometimes.
Oh, absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
But I agree with Kirk. I think the immediacy, it just kind of gives you a little bit of a charge. I mean, the Associated Press thing was like a deadline every minute, and that's basically what it is now with us too. It's a deadline every minute.
And I always feel uneasy about the whole thing, where you're rushing to get something out there first, but our instinct growing up and training and everything, make sure it's right. Make sure somebody edits it.
And not partial.
Right.
Get it.
So
when I put it out, I still fight that instinct. I want to put a 20-inch story up online. And really now we need to put a 2-paragraph story up online and go back and backfill it. And then we get to listen to it on radio later. When it's
without credit. But it's different, but it's fun. And let's talk a little bit just about that, and we'll wrap up here shortly. But it kind of gets into the thing of just favorite experiences and what I'd really like to in your careers. And I'll start this by just saying, and this is kind of where the internet has led us, and the technology of it and the immediacy. And it's happened. Most notably, I've had this experience with covering baseball, postseason baseball, and the two that stick out in mind was Game 6 of the 2011 World Series between the Cardinals and the Rangers, and then the other was Game 7 of the 2016 World Series when the Cubs, went to extra innings to beat the Indians, and both of those games were going right up to our newspaper deadlines with uncertainty. Right. Okay, and so I've got a newspaper deadline I got to hit. Okay, I mean that's a reality. I have a newspaper deadline I have to hit, as we all do. Even with all the internet stuff, you miss the newspaper deadline, you're in trouble. So both those games were in doubt, and I had been writing. In the case of the 2011 with the Cardinals, I was writing this thing because the Rangers were dominating this game. So I'm writing, the Rangers are going to win the World Series. Rangers win the World Series. I got this story 2/3 done. Then the Cardinals make a comeback. So now I'm like, I better get a Cardinals story ready. And then all of a sudden, it's in extra innings, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's like, holy cow, I'm going to have a deadline situation. So now I'm writing a third story where at deadline the game is tied. Okay, same thing happened in 16. Here I'm writing about the Cubs are winning the World Series, about the dude. I've got that story virtually written. I'm waiting for the final, and all of a sudden the Indians tie it. So now I'm scrambling.
And then rain.
Don't remind me.
Well, and so I've gotten all this, and I'm writing that story. And the Cubs story, I'm focused on Ben Zobrist, who at that hadn't yet been named the MVP, but had a great series. And so the Indians, I've been talking to Zach McAllister, and I've talked to his parents, so I've got that. So I'm wildly writing this as we approach deadline because, oh my goodness, the Indians could win this. And then it's extra innings, and I'm like, okay, there's a little time, and then it starts to rain, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, this game might still be tied when the paper goes bad. So I've got a third story done, and then they come back from the rain delay, and in both cases the games ended like within 5 minutes before I had to hit the button to put it back here for deadline. And then, but is the internet. Now you get off the print thing. Now you back in the print-only day, you would have gone down, would have got stuff together for a follow story for the next day's paper.
Right.
No, now I'm racing down, I'm getting interviews, I'm going back, and I am overwriting, replacing the story that I had posted on the line, and then I go back to my hotel room, and I'm writing till 6 o'clock in the morning, posting more stories to the internet.
It's brutal.
It is a wild deal.
I mean, you really got to love it.
It's brutal. Yes, you do, and we all love it, which is why we're in it. But it's exhilarating too. I mean, there is no high that I have ever experienced, legal or illegal, like a newspaper, a job well done on a newspaper deadline.
Yeah.
I concur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. That's that 11th hour, 59th minute feeling.
Panic, and then success.
And then you got it.
Yeah. It's the highest of highs, the lowest of lows.
You know when it's good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really feel like you've accomplished something when it's all over.
So, any favorite experiences you guys want to share before we wrap up?
As far as event coverage, the World Series was always a cool event to cover. All-Star games. Bradley in the Sweet 16. Never thought I'd see that during my coverage years, but that happened in '06. And but probably the most personally satisfying for me has been the opportunity to meet like some of my heroes from my youth. Like I got to meet Mickey Mantle and interview him. I got to meet Joe DiMaggio and meet him. Stan Musial. You know, all these legends of the game, I guess. And those are the ones that stick in my memory as far as, you know, the things that really meant the most to me. And those aren't necessarily, you know, newspaper stories, but, you know, when I think back to my career, having that opportunity was very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always used to love covering the state basketball tournament before they ruined it 10 years ago and made it a 4-class tournament instead of the 2-class tournament. That was always a pageant. It was always so much fun. And usually Peoria acquitted itself very well at the state level. Kirk and I still talk about the '97 manual team that, you know, ended up beating Thornton in the semifinals there that day. I don't think I've ever seen an arena as full as the Civic Center was for that game. I mean, there were people standing in the aisles. There were people standing 5, 6 deep in the doorways. Supposedly there were 3,000 or 4,000 people outside that were trying to get in that couldn't get in because it was the fire marshal was going crazy, and the game lived up to its hype.
Greatest high school game I think I have ever seen. And you know, that triple overtime that East St. Louis beat Peoria High in for the title in 1989 was tremendous, and it was on a different kind of level. But that '97 semifinal between Thornton and Manual, with the wild swings and runs and the big leads being mounted and going away and coming back with that crowd that was standing room only, and like you said, people sitting in the aisles all the way up the top. Every aisle to the top of the Civic Center was full of people sitting.
Right, those were the top 2 teams in the country.
They were 1 and 2 in USA Today's ranking, and it was just, I've never seen a high school game like that.
No, I doubt I ever will. You'll never see anything like the Manual 4-peat again. I don't think either on the local level or on the state level, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember those high school state tournaments when they were in Champaign, and I got to bunk with you.
That was pretty memorable, was it?
I remember.
Well, it was for one of us, at least.
5 in the morning, waking up, and there you were standing at the foot of your bed with your hand over your heart because the national anthem was playing against the test pattern on the TV.
And after that was how many beers after?
I was just going to ask.
I was going to go use the bathroom, but I just turned and went back to bed after I saw that.
Out of respect.
Out of respect.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know who got up to do that, but you were the man. Now I felt lucky to be able to cover 4 championship pro teams, 2 indoor football, and twice with the Rivermen, and just everything that surrounds that stuff. But that 90-91 Rivermen season in the IHL, that run to a professional hockey record win streak was just amazing, and all the stories that spun off of that. There was something every day, you know, the magic orb, which was the nub of a center, Michel Mongeau's hockey stick that they kept locked in a velvet-lined little security box, and other teams sending guys into the locker room to try to steal it. It's just little weird things like that going on. And then, of course, the night they got the record up in Kalamazoo, and hundreds and hundreds of Rivermen fans in a caravan on the highway with flags hanging out the windows of their vehicles, passing the team bus on the way to let the players know they were there, and national media for Canada and all over the U.S. up there, and it was. And Dick Lean upsetting all the food on press row. It was an amazing that was an amazing night up there. Yeah. I mean, you were really you had the hockey news and all, everybody who was anybody was in that little 5,000 seat Wings Stadium in Kalamazoo that night to see that game, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And to see Peoria on the map like that. And that record held up for over 20 years.
I'm kind of like Dave. I just think of all the just being fortunate enough to meet people, at all levels. I mean, from, I was fortunate enough growing up here and right across the street from the field house. And, and Chuck Osborne, Ozzie, the legendary Bradley coach of the century, lived behind us and would walk through our driveway on his way to the field house every day. So I got to know him as a little kid. And Joe Stoll, lived just a few blocks away, and I, went to school with his kids and got to know him at a young age. And, so that there, Joe Billy McDade, the judge, rented a room in the house next door to us. So, he kind of took me under his wing when I was 3 years old. Just so many experiences like that. And then on through the professional career, the people that you get to meet, that's what really makes it special. I mean, there's events, but the people, I've always felt, and Dick Lean told me this. I mean, once he came and he said, I had written, some story, and I was kind of feeling good about myself. I can dash this stuff off. And I wrote this story, and it was a piece of crap. I mean, honestly, it was a piece of crap. And Dick comes over, and he says, "Come here," and he taps on the story, like with his finger. He says, "You can do better than this." Yeah. And he goes into this thing. He starts telling me, "Don't worry about the X's and O's. He said, talk to the people. Write about the people."
Exactly.
And so that huge impact, and that's what it's all about, is telling people stories. I mean, because it's human beings. That's what makes sports special, is the human beings that play it, and win or lose, and how their human frailties, they overcome them, they bust through obstacles, or they succumb to the pressure or whatever. That's what people connect with. They might think they're connecting with the thrill of a great catch or whatever, but the real connection is the human beings.
Yep.
That reminds me of when you flew me out to the figure skating nationals.
Yeah.
In Salt Lake City, and I'm like, oh boy,
Isn't him covering figure skating?
I don't know about this. Let me tell you, that was an amazing.
Was it?
It was Matt Savoy's
breakout year.
It was an amazing event, and what I didn't know in X's and O's, I just avoided, and I wrote about the kid.
Right.
And I ended up in a room after his performance with an agent and all these power brokers in there, and it was a great story to be able to tell.
Yeah,
and I've always told younger guys on the staff over the years the same thing that you just said. Don't worry about trying to describe the X's and O's. Write about the person.
Right.
It's all about the people.
Make them walk and talk.
Yeah, and even when you've got to write about the X's and O's, tell it through the eyes of the people that have to do it. Let them do it.
That's how I faked my way through covering tennis for 20 years.
There you go. But I got the people, and just this remains one of the thrills of my life, and it happened in maybe 2 years into my career. I got to meet and interview Wilma Rudolph.
Oh, cool.
And it was just really cool. And then other people too. I mean, just so many. You just rattle off, and I've been blessed to cover so many cool things. The one story I've retold this to student groups and whatever else that just I guess this gets to the thing. And Dave Kindred talks about this a lot. The great sports writer who lives out there in Carlock and writes about the Morton Lady Potters now in retirement. One of the great sports writers in the history of the world. Talks about, go to the losers' locker room. Yeah. Work the losers. Yeah. Better stories in the losers. Mm-hmm. And so just 1982, I'm at the Final Four in New Orleans, and it's North Carolina versus Georgetown for the championship. Great game. It's the game where, 15 seconds left or so, Michael Jordan hits the wing shot, puts North Carolina in the lead, ultimately is the game winner. And, Jordan has talked about it being the shot that gave him the confidence, because he was a freshman then, the confidence to take all those big shots through that remarkable career. And so that's what people identify with. And yet what's been forgotten, I think, over the years is that, there's still, like I said, 13, 14 seconds left after this shot. Georgetown's got a chance to win it. And they come down the court, and Freddie Brown is the Georgetown point guard, and the play starts to set up and develop, and he's by the top of the key, And as guys are moving, he passes out to the right wing, and it's like, whoa. And there's nobody there except James Worthy from North Carolina. And it's like, oops, and James Worthy goes down, and I think I can't remember even, I think there was a foul or something like that, and then Carolina salts it away, and the game's over. And so everybody's mobbing to talk to Jordan, and everybody's mobbing because Dean Smith, then the coach at North Carolina, had finally, he'd been to like 5 NCAA Final Fours, and he finally won his first one. And I'm like, well, I'm interested in Freddie Brown.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I go to the Georgetown locker room, and the only other reporter in the Georgetown locker room was from the Washington Post. It was a guy named Dave Kindred. And Dick Lean had introduced me to Dave, a couple of years before. I barely knew him at the time. But I said, hey, Dave, where is, have you seen Freddie Brown? He looks around, he goes, just coming out of the shower. So I go over, and Freddie Brown's at his locker and slowly getting dressed, and I talked to him. I had Freddie Brown for a solid 5 or 6 minutes before any other reporters showed up, just one-on-one. And he takes me through the play and all this, and his mood, and we talked about what John Thompson talked to him about, the coach, afterwards, saying, hey, consoling him and giving him life advice and all this. So I'm like, that's cool. And then a couple other reporters come in, and you guys, everybody's been there. The mob starts coming in, the waves, and they start answering asking the same questions and having to repeat the answers. And I was about to leave, and suddenly there was something in his answer that's like, that was interesting. It was the same answer, but it was phrased a little differently. So I just kind of hung there on the thing, and I popped in a couple more questions as I got a chance. Stood there the whole 30 minutes the locker room was open. And it's getting down, there's like guys, SIDs hollering, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever. Some guy breathlessly comes in, needing something from Freddie Brown. And he goes, Freddie, I'm sorry if you've been around, you asked this question, but on that pass, how could you throw such a terrible pass in that situation?
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And Freddie Brown looks at him. He goes, hey, man, it wasn't a terrible pass. It was a great pass. It was just to the wrong guy. I'm like, I have my story. Thank you very much. Drop the mic. Good night.
See, and that's a great point. The Rivermen one year under Wayne Thomas had lost 14 straight games. This was in the late 80s. And the people were telling me, it's awful to have to cover a team like this that's losing 14 straight. And I always told people, there's good stories in losses.
Oh, absolutely.
I go into his office one night, and he says, I just wanted to let you know, I could have these guys go out and just goon it up and end the streak, but we're trying to teach them to be committed and believe in a system, a style of play. So we're going to seek this out. And we get to talking, and then I said, how do you assess what you have right now as a team? And he was a deadpan humor guy anyway, and he looks at me and goes, well, we're small, but we're slow. Favorite quote ever.
Gotta love him. Well, guys, we've been at this a while, and we gotta get moving.
One more thing, though, before we leave.
Yeah.
What are you going to miss the most about this job?
Oh, you guys. Really, truly.
This
stuff. So I kind of hope that eventually we can still go out to Hoops or some bar after you're done with your games on certain nights and still have a drink or pizza or whatever it might be. But yeah, first of all, it's the people and the characters we've been talking about and all that office stuff. It's always, like I said, about the people. And the other is just that, like I said, the thrill of the deadline. The pressure and it's that adrenaline rush and getting the story and getting what is that great story, that money story, like the Freddie Brown thing, the quote or just the great story, all the and again at any level. It's been I remember doing a story on a back almost 40 years ago on a girl in Missouri. Who was a freshman and was going out for high school football. So I went out and talked to her. a girl, and this was 40 years ago when there were not even a full field of other girls' sports, and by God, she's going to play football, and that, and then not just those people and those kind of stories, but just knowing when, wow, I've got something special here, through somebody's experience, or you've seen something in an event. I mean, I think you mentioned Matt Savoy in the national figure skating. You had the same kind of experience as I did. It's like, I didn't watch figure skating. My wife would, it was figure skating, come on, it's like, I'm leaving the room. So now we have a tremendous up and coming figure skating here in our community. So we're going to cover him. And I wound up, I remember the first time, it's like, well, somebody want to go to cover Matt in the Nationals? And everybody's like, I don't want to cover figure skating. So I went to the first one, his first senior Nationals out in Philly. The next year I couldn't go, so I sent you out there. And then I followed him up the rest of his career and his Olympics in '06. But my very first one in Philadelphia, and I'm like, okay, so I'm doing some studying up beforehand. And I got out there and I looked up Christine Brennan, for some advice, because she is the maven of covering.
She's the mama bear.
The mama bear of the media that cover figure skating. And she was very helpful. So I learned a couple things talking to her. But then I'm watching, and I'm trying to figure these things out. And it was interesting. The people were interesting, as always. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. Right. But then as a sport, I'm up there watching the women's figure skating. And Michelle Kwan comes out and throws in. This was in the days of the old 6-point system. So 6.0 was that perfect that everyone was stretching for. And she laid down a performance that was like almost straight 6.0s. And I remember watching that and thinking, I get this now. Because it was so beautiful. And watching it from an elevated spot. On TV, and this is true of a lot of sports.
Yeah. Differently.
TV, you just get focused tight on the action. In an arena, and this is the thing that makes baseball a bad TV sport, is because part of the beauty of watching baseball is you watch all the movements of the players between pitches and all the other things. There's so many things going on in a baseball game. But figure skating, you're up above it and you're watching, and it's like, holy crap. I mean, it's like there's this giant canvas, and they're painting pictures with their skates. And it was just, I got it, and I have been a fan of figure skating ever since. So thank you, Matt Savoy and Michelle Kwan. So yeah, but there's so many things like that, and we could go on another hour. But I will miss you guys. It's been fun.
We will miss you, and on behalf of the staff, we're going to miss your leadership, your guidance, and just making it a fun place to work all these years.
Well, thank you, Tried. And love you, dude.
Best boss I ever had. That includes my dad. Sorry, Dad.
And I haven't even given you a spanking.
Dad would probably agree. I mean,
well, thank you guys for all your hard work and your dedication. You're passionate, and that's, I mean, you love this business, and you bleed it, and you do it well, and good luck to all of you in the future. So
I just want to say before we sign off, thanks for giving me a shot, because that year and a half after graduating, not having a job and not getting emails back and being rejected was tough, but you gave me a shot, and I've loved every minute of being here, and you've been like a father to me, and I've improved so much from wanting to be a TV guy to where I'm at now. So thank you. Well, and thank all of you for all your help.
He's a good one, folks.
It's been a pleasure. That'll do it for this edition of the Journal-Star Sportswriters. Signing off. Kirk Wessler, Dave Reynolds, Nick Vlahos, Dave Eminian, Aaron Ferguson. Love you. Check in next time, see what happens.